strength to tell my story in a way that gives you the glory, in a way that opens hearts to those who need to hear these words that you speak through me. I pray, Lord, that my story touches the hearts of those who need to hear it and softens the hearts of those around. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the power and the will and the words to speak my story in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I want to let you know that there may be things that could trigger or cause emotion. Please feel free at any time to get up and excuse yourself. I won't take it personal. And this story has parts that are as hard to hear as it is to tell. My story starts at the age of 4, but for many years I truly believed that my story started at the age of 14, the day that I was raped by my then boyfriend. Following that rape, I went into a downhill spiral of depression and suicidal tendencies. My thoughts got so bad that I took an 8-day vacation at Bellin Psych Center. I expressed it many times that I had been raped, but I never told anyone at that time who did it. 8 days after being admitted, I am released. Not because the doctors felt that I was no harm to myself or that I was any better, but because my parents' insurance would not cover any more days and my parents pulled me out because I was costing too much. I didn't know that I would hear those words so many times in the upcoming years. After going home, I closed that part of my life out as much as I could, but what I couldn't stop was the subconscious, the dreams, the thoughts, all the hallway looks, all the gossip and rumors of how I lied and that he was not my first one. I fell into the life of addiction. Looking back, I see now that it started way back at the age of 12 when I took medication to help me sleep or to numb the emotional pain. But it would be years before I would make that connection. My addiction started as pills that I stole from my father, who we will discuss in detail a little bit later. He was prescribed to. And it was not long before that high was not enough. And I would steal, cheat, lie, and sell those drugs to get better drugs to get a bigger high. Hearing the lies that flew the hallways, I did not understand. You see, my parents never sat me down and discussed the birds and the bees or what happened before, during, or after. So I started sleeping around with other men at this time. After all, if my so-called friends were saying it, I might as well make it true. That was my unfortunate thought process. Again, it will be years before I make the connections. I started to find guys older than me on the internet, sneaking out late at night to meet them, some from in-state, others from out of the area. This would get me into trouble with the law, but that's another story for another time. But relationships, especially with men, would be something I will struggle with for many years. As I grew, so did my addiction. What started as pill popping to help me sleep at night with no nightmares became more pills to numb the pain and the wounds that I was never allowed to heal, and that quickly turned into meth and cocaine. I started out just as a party thing, but it quickly grew into an almost everyday thing, and my looks began to change. I looked in the mirror, my face was full of spots that I had picked off from itching. But once more, my parents declined the truth and put it off saying that it was just from acne. And they turned a blind eye as to what was going on underneath their household while I was at the young age of 14 to 17, drugs, sex, and self-harm. My parents did have me in counseling at this time, and after many trial and errors, I finally found a girl I trusted named Laura. But I was not confident enough to give the name of who raped me, and she tried doing what is called REM, rapid eye movement. And that was getting some insight as to what happened not at the age of 14, but things did not seem to add up to either her nor I. The memories that I was expressing emotions to, as I recalled them, I did not recall them at all. And before long, Laura moved on and left the area. I was left alone once more because my parents would not find anyone else for me because it was once again costing too much. And the bills were already being paid by my college fund, which would be down to zero before I even graduated from high school. At the age of 15, I got my first job at Walmart. I became friends with a girl named Donna. She was 17, had a baby, and was already married. She had a place of her own. I would spend many nights at her house, only returning home to my parents for the holidays. My parents never expressed any concern for this. I was not costing them any money. I was showing up for school and not causing any inconvenience. So from that point on, I just found a way to take care of myself and never went back. Donna is where I would meet my first husband, a mutual friend, Jason. Many highs happened and almost no lows, because to be honest, I was never not high. Life was great. I was passing school barely. I had to answer to no one, doing whatever I wished when I wanted. I had no pain or suffering, and my basic needs were met. After all, I really only thought I needed a place to live, because I had been anorexic since I was about the age of 4, so I did not believe that I needed anything else. Life went on, but at a party, one of the guys who I always partied with, he died, an overdose. This guy's name was Corey. He thought he was unstoppable, and he thought he was Superman. But the high stopped him, and it stopped him in his tracks. Shortly after his death, it was Christmas, and I was home. Not because I wanted to be, or anyone wanted me there, but because I had no place to go, and I felt like an outcast at other people's homes on the holidays. I was laying in bed, coming down from a high, when I was watching the clock. I will never forget these moments. I tried to take a breath in, but my body physically couldn't. I couldn't breathe. I felt my heart pick up a beat and then slow down. It was inside my head at this point, unable to move my body, and I just laid there watching the clock for 2 whole minutes. They went by and I could not breathe. Those 2 minutes were the longest minutes of my life, and all I could think was that this is not what I wanted, and how could this be happening? That was in December, and in January, after the holidays, I sat my mother down and I told her everything. I told her the rape in details, my addiction, my self-harm, the sex. I spilt it all out. We cried together, and I thought for sure it would be a bonding moment, and I would be fixed, and I would finally get the help I needed after all these years. But boy, was I wrong. My mother hugged me until I was done ugly girl crying, and then she sat me down next to her, and I can still see her face as she speaks to me. She told me, "We cannot report your rape. No one will believe you, and if they do, we'll have to go to court, and it will cost us so much, and we can't afford a lawyer, and his family is practically rich. We must tell no one and just move on." As devastated as I was about this, what came next just crushed me. My mother went on about how my dad would detox me at home and I would be fine because once again, they didn't have the money. And looking back, I truly believe they did not want the town to hear about their addict daughter. After all, enough was being said about them. I was 16 and I did not know any better. I did not know that I had other choices at the time, and I had no reason to trust and not believe my own mother. So for the next 6 months, my dad would detox me. I moved from the upstairs bedroom to the basement, and I isolated myself. I was given drugs only as my father felt fit, and that was the only reason I stayed home. Somehow, I didn't go searching for more because I truly wanted to get clean and get better. But the detox was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. During detox, I was so sick and so scared. I became so terrified that I had to cover door handles because I truly thought the devil would come out of my reflection. August, I got a MySpace message from what's called the Steve Willico Show. You know Jerry Springer? Well, his big old bodyguard, way back in the day, was starting his own talk show. They had gotten word that I was a suffering addict and wanted me to come on the show and tell my story. They pulled me in with assuring me they would get me the help that I needed to get clean. They promised they would do so, and I so desperately craved for that. I talked my mother into it, and she agreed. Because she was still a minor, because I was still a minor, I needed her consent, but once again, it was all being paid for by the show. So my mother thought she would have a vacation, so why would she say no? The Steve Willico Show is not what any of us expected. It showed a girl with good grades and a cheerleader who could become an addict, but after the introduction, it took a terrible turn. Things they agreed not to bring up, they did, and they put all the blame on my mother. How could she know about it all? And my mother admitted on the show that she knew about my addiction, but she didn't know what to do. Steve Willico could not understand how my mother could not only know, but choose to sit there and do nothing. It ended with my mom at a pity party. And Steve Willico, he pointed out how I came on the show to get clean, and there I was comforting my own mother, making sure she was okay when it should have been the other way around. The only good thing that came out of that show was that they paid for my rehab. In 2007, I changed schools and I went to Libertas LLC. I went through their outpatient rehab program, completed it. My parents showed up when they had to, and I was left to get clean on my own. The selling point to make sure that I always stayed clean was when this lady looked me in the eyes and she told me, "I will see you again. No one your age stays clean the first time around." I promised myself and God I would get and stay clean. To this day, I am 11 years clean, but my story sadly does not end here. Rather, this is just the beginning of a much bigger hurt and a harder hurt that will slowly uncover. In 2007, I was clean and I had met a gentleman online from the East Coast who I had called Prince, because to my disbelief, he did not really want any part of sex. Rather, Prince wanted to share the good news of God with me. And in August, right there, after I got clean and with Prince on the other line of the phone, I gave myself and my life to Christ's care and control. From that day in 2007, I would battle 1 foot on and 1 foot off for many years to come. But my love for Christ will grow, and it soon overtook me. This is the part where I would normally stop my testimony, but is where my testimony truly begins. I grew up with a mom and dad who were married to each other, 2 older half-brothers, 1 younger sister. My mom worked a lot, or so I thought she did, but as the older I got, I'm not sure what exactly she did, because it turns out she stayed home to take care of us kids, while only working part-time. My dad had a nervous breakdown when I was only 4, and my sister was 9 months old. My dad would spend 3 years in the hospital every day, and the following 3 years back and forth from hospital to home. My 2 older brothers were old enough that they would take care of themselves. My mother took my sister, and she shipped me off to my Aunt Sherry's house. Sherry is my dad's half-sister, and that's where I would spend most of the time from ages 4 to 10. At the age of 10, I was told my younger sister was blamed for coloring on the floor, which would turn out to be a lie, and we would never see or hear of them again. Strange, right? Well, let me walk you through those years so that it adds up to you guys as well. My mother is controlling, and I truly believe that she gave up on parenting way too soon. My father was a great dad when he could be, and he tried his best, but he had an anger in him that would show himself in inappropriate ways. His mental status would not allow him to be a father that a girl needed. My oldest brother and I would grow together and then fade far apart back to close again. He is the father figure that I still look up to this day. My other brother and I never really had much of a relationship. He will grow up and move away and not be heard from much. My younger sister and I have a lot of anger and resentment and blame and never were close, and we will grow even more distant. I did not think of Sherry or have many memories of her when I was young, and always thought it was because my dad was sick and I was a daddy's girl. I missed my dad a lot, and most of my teen years were gone due to the drug use. I use that as an excuse and made myself believe it. But as the years go on and the counseling and my relationship grows with Christ more and more, I begin to make the connections. And this is where I pick up from where we left before. Part of the rehab program was to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, at least once a week, if not more, to complete a 12-step program. I went to Wednesday nights at Bell and Psych. Everything was going fine. I'd been clean for about 6 weeks, when all of a sudden my Aunt Sherry shows up unexpectedly. All I remember of Sherry at this time is that we used to be close but grew apart, and I never understood the story that had always been given as an excuse as to why we stopped seeing her. On this day, she was over the top nice to me, and I pushed it off as being super excited to see me after all these years. She buys me the books that I had been saving up to buy from NA. She tells me she's proud of me, some things to this day that I've never heard my parents say. She walks up to me and walks me to my car. As we reach my car, she gives me this birthday card and says goodbye. I unlock my car and get in. I open the card, and I have a panic attack right there in the parking lot. The card from Sherry is apologizing for hurting me. She did not ever mean to, and she hopes that I could forgive her. I am 17 at this time, and I don't understand what happened or why I had a panic attack, so I brush it off, and I go about my own business. In 2007, I will run into Sherry again. Again, she will apologize and give me another birthday card and ask for my forgiveness. My father will then bring me to the police station. We will get a restraining order, and again, I will not fully understand what happened or why both my father and I reacted the way that we did until years to come. The following years, I remain clean, but I make so many bad mistakes. I stick it out with my now husband, Jason, who was emotionally and by the time we divorced, physically abusive. Jason cheated and got another girl pregnant. We tried for 4 years together to have a child, and after many failed attempts and a miscarriage, we were not able to bear children. This will cause a huge wedge between us. I chose Jason over going to school for overseas mission work at Evangel University. My biggest regret in life so far. We were together for 4 years, and in 2011 we divorced. I hear many "I told you so's" from my entire family and friends, and I go back to my old ways. I remain clean, but I turn to sex and men again to find that comfort from being wanted by someone, by anyone. Heck, I even gave in to being a stripper for a while. I justify my actions because I am not being given money for sex, and I told myself it's better than prostitution. In 2011, I become pregnant. During that pregnancy, I met my now husband, Mike, who truly will stick it out through thick and thin and help me start my healing process. Mike is also a recovering alcoholic for 20 years. And Joel, our son, is the best blessing that I've ever been given. Mike is who helped me place the missing pieces together to take a broken and dysfunctional family and make it that much more complicated. But Mike has given me the strength and the courage that I could not find alone and that I never thought I had within me. When Mike and I first met, I had seen many counselors, psychiatrists, and other people to help heal and guide you, and I had figured out what the true trigger in my past was, and I kept it a secret, and I was sure I was going to go to the grave with it. And that was until I met Mike. He was the first person I told, and Mike urged me to ask the questions no matter how hard they were to ask, because I needed to find answers, to find closure and peace. So I started asking questions. It's now 2014. I knew from the dreams that I had in the past, talking to professionals and doing and using REM, from the counseling and praying and listening to God, that I admitted and accepted that at my aunt's house I had been sexually abused many times over the years. But that was all I knew to start out with. I had gotten up the courage to ask my mom the first question. I did it over text because I was too afraid of my reaction in person depending on her answer. The first question intended to be, did you know? But it came out, did you notice any warning signs? And without further explanation, my mother answered yes. And as if that was not bad enough, my mother continued on with what they were. Question after question, my mother answered them, and she answered them truthfully and to the best of her knowledge. God held me in his arms at this time, and he never gave me more than I could handle. At that exact time, answers to those questions were all that I could take. The questions go on via text form for over a year. My relationship with my parents grew farther apart, and I placed space between my two siblings and myself, but I got closer to my oldest brother. I decided when my dad went in for open heart surgery in 2018 that, as if that wasn't enough on my mother's plate, I confessed to her what happened to me all those years ago. And what I told my mother was something like this. I always thought the rape back in 2004 was what triggered my addiction, my depression, and all the sex due to what is called suppressed memories. Because I could not take the pain and had no way to process, and I truly did not understand that what was happening was not right by any means, so I blocked them. I put up walls, but through the years, the counseling, the REM, the talks, it all brought it back, and made each and every bad decision I ever made make sense for the first time. At that time, I told my mother that at the age of 4, when my dad had his nervous breakdown and I was shipped to my Aunt Sherry's house, I was sexually abused for 6 years. My mother, knowing, but had nowhere else to take me, I told her that I was sexually abused by my aunt and random men for money. I was abused by my aunt, who would do things as she pleased, things no child should ever have done to them. But worst of all, I was sold to men to do as they pleased to me, or to the other children that Sherry took care of at the same time. There was 4 of us that I remember. I won't go into too much detail, as this is a very hard part of my testimony for me and can become a big trigger. And honestly, this is the first time that I am truly speaking of this publicly. But what happened to me is known today as sex trafficking. I was taken, used, abused, and forced to do things that I never agreed, and I had no control in any situation. It was used above my head if I was a good girl, or whether I could play outside or not, or watch TV. I had no control over food or when I wanted to sleep, because most of the action happened late into the night. And I would be woken up, and a man would do things that I never gave permission for them to do. The only way I got through that time was by putting those walls up, placing imaginary walls to block out what was happening. And years later, the drugs would help heal the pain and the memories that tried to crawl back. So many times, I just let life happen, as I pretended life did not even exist and that it was not truly happening. But I cannot pretend any longer. I expressed to my mother, and she told me with tears in her eyes that she knew and that she was sorry, but she didn't know what to do, and she got me out as soon as she could. My mother gave me a speech that she and my father went to the police and they did nothing. I'm not sure that I truly believe that to this day, which brings me to where I am today. What I do with what happened to me is my choice. I choose not to be a victim. I choose to be a survivor. 2 times I expressed my emotions and told my story to my mother, and both times she and others would not believe. And both times she told me that I could do nothing. Both times I was devastated by her response, and both times I believed that nothing could be done until it was too late, until I could not stop them from hurting others. Both of those times, and so many more, Even when I did not know it was happening, God held me and carried me when I could not go on myself, and no one else was there to hold me tight. Ecclesiastes 7:13. Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? This is my story, and God chose me to walk through this so that I could help those in need, so that their story can help others, so that together we can stop this. Stories of abuse are not made up. They are real, and the emotions that go along with them are just as real, and they will be just as painful. The guilt, the shame, fear of rejection, the desire to be enough, those are my true struggles today. This year I've worked on forgiveness and learned how to accept God's grace, but that still has a long way to go. I have been told many times that it is a process, but through Christ I am set free. To the newcomer, take one day at a time, and if that's too much, take one moment at a time. And if that's too much, take 1 second at a time. But most importantly, pray. Pray with belief and no doubt. Surrender it all to God. Give it away, and don't take it back. God is the only explanation of not only how I made it through, but the only explanation of why my story has this happy ending. The truth is that God has great things in store for each one of us. My story is meant to help someone else. Our healing will be hard, and it will hurt, but God will carry you when you feel you cannot go on. God will give you strength when you are weak. God never breaks his promises. Joel 2:25. God can restore what is broken and restore it into something amazing. All you need is faith. This is not the ending, rather it's just the beginning. My story has just begun. As we start a new step study, I cannot wait to see the coffee moments. Those moments that God has planned for me. I define coffee moments as just like that first sip of coffee in the morning, how great it tastes and it fills your body with joy for the entire day. I have those moments with Jesus every single day. At Celebrate Recovery, I have found peace and confidence. I am no longer hidden at the back pew at Destiny Church. I am no longer driven by fear. I have become involved in church and Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery has shown me what a safe place to tell my story looks like. I have made friendships that are more like family. I have found that there is more to me than what meets the eye. My foundation runs deeper than I ever thought. But the most important thing that I have learned is that I matter. My emotions, my thoughts, my actions, they all matter. I can have them and I can accept them, but Celebrate Recovery has really taught me how to handle them and whether or not I respond to them. This truly is just my beginning, and I cannot wait to see what God has in store for my future. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and to give you hope. Celebrate Recovery.